How we doing, everybody? Welcome to episode 8 of Banter from the Bench podcast. We've got a little bit of a different episode today, actually. We're going to dive into our recap on the NHL draft and the NBA draft. We also have NBA free agency starting literally as we're recording this right now, so we'll stay on top of the signings that are happening as we're talking, so that way we can talk about that. Maybe whether or not we like the dollar signs associated with certain players and just kind of go from there. The Bulls actually did have a signing of their own, so we'll make sure to touch on that as well. So plenty of good stuff to talk about, and let's get ready to dive in.
Soundstripe.
Thank you all for tuning in to another episode here with us on Banter from the Bench. Like Kevin discussed, this is going to be a little bit different of an episode. We are recording on a Sunday and doing some draft recaps and also kind of going off some live news that comes in while we record. So make sure to tune in for all of it. We're going to kick things off with national draft coverage first, and then we'll trickle into some Chicago draft coverage as well. So with that being said, plenty of stuff to go over today. You won't want to miss any of this, so make sure to follow along, and we'll get started here with the NHL draft. And Kevin, I think before we dive into this, I know what we're going to do is talk about some picks we liked from teams other than the Blackhawks, but I think the first thing we need to talk about is, I don't know about you, but that looked freaking awesome inside the Sphere. Just what an unbelievable experience for a draft, and I hope to see more come from that.
I want every draft to be in the Sphere. I thought that was really cool. I also like that they actually broke the trades down live for the people that are attending the draft versus, you really only get to hear the details if you're watching it on TV, and they had like the goal horn going off too. I think they did an absolutely phenomenal job having the draft there. It was so cool. I can imagine what it was like to be there. So I applaud the NHL. Hopefully they keep doing the draft at the Sphere every year. And honestly, I hope every draft is there, including NBA and NFL.
Yeah, what a great place to do it. And it certainly seemed like they really nailed everything with that draft. And the trade alert with the big horn and the sounds and stuff.
So cool.
Was pretty funny. And I was following along with a variety of beat reporters that were there. And one of them made a comment. I forget exactly who it was, but he said, I think we're going to break the record for most pictures posted from beat writers showing that they're covering the draft in the Sphere. So not only did it seem like fans enjoyed it, but it seemed like the people who were getting to cover it got to enjoy it quite a bit as well. So good job, NHL. That was a pretty awesome event, and it was fun to tune in and watch. And with that being said, we're going to kick off our NHL draft coverage here. So like I said, we'll go over some non-Blackhawks picks that we liked, and a little bit of a spoiler, I guess, if you didn't tune in to the NHL draft or have no idea what happened. But one of the first picks I liked, it was Ivan Demidov to the Montreal Canadiens at 5. And if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that was one of my guy for the Blackhawks. So I was hoping they would take it number 2. Turns out they did not, and a couple other teams passed on them as well. Now, one big reason I like it is they got great value at 5th overall, and for Montreal that could not have worked out any better, because it seemed like heading into the draft on draft day that Demidov was going to fall, and Montreal was very interested in him. They were exploring opportunities to trade up, but turns out they did not need to do that, and he fell right into their laps with the 5th pick. So Ivan Demidov to the Montreal Canadiens at number 5 was the first pick where I was like, you know what? I like that. I like that a lot. How about you? You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, talk about tremendous value, right? This is a guy that was being talked about for a large portion of the year at going number 1 overall, and he falls to Montreal at number 5. I think he's going to be a game changer in the NHL if he pans out to the player that they think he will be. And to get him at 5th overall is honestly really impressive. I've got a couple other names some picks that I really like. If you want, I can dive into mine. Mine's more rapid fire than diving into each pick and going more granular with that. So if you want, I can dive into a couple picks that I really liked from the draft.
Go right ahead, my friend.
Okay, cool. TJ Ginla. TJ Ginla going to the Utah Hockey Club. Not only is he a great player himself, obviously he's got a pretty high ceiling, but look at the pedigree that he comes from. You know, his dad had a long and successful career in the NHL. He was honestly one of my favorite players growing up. I liked Calgary for a period of time, specifically because of Jerome Ginla. So I really liked that was their first pick of their franchise, their new franchise. And Sean, I think I nailed it. I think it is going to be the Utah Yeti because their GM accidentally dropped the name in an interview after the draft. So I think long term, yes, I think long term they're going to be the Utah Yeti. So I was happy to hear that. Another pick that I really liked, and honestly, their draft overall, was San Jose picking up Sam Dickinson, number 11 overall. And when you pair that with Macklin Celebrini, you're doing pretty damn good in the first round. So I thought they had a really nice draft. As far as picks that I really liked, I'll start there. I'll let you dive into a couple guys that you liked as well.
Yeah, so I am right there with you. I thought the Sharks did really well. Obviously, when you have the first pick in the draft, it's pretty easy to do well, but they really cleaned up, I thought, with the way the board fell and what they did. Obviously, Celebrini first overall was a no-brainer. If they didn't take that, they would have been the biggest loser of the draft. And then I also liked how they took Sam Dickinson I believe they took him 11, yep. And heading into the draft, a lot of mocks had Dickinson as about a top 5, top 6, top 7 pick. So you're looking at a lot of value there. And then additionally, a big reason why I also liked the Sharks draft is they opened up, let me see here, I'm pulling up draft results as we speak. Yes, they opened up the second round by taking Igor Chernyshov, a winger from Russia, who is also a very high value pick there that I liked a lot. They got him at 33, and based on Elite Prospects draft rankings, Chernyshov was ranked as the 19th overall prospect in the draft. So,
damn.
Obviously, we talked about it in detail plenty with the Blackhawks situation, but the Russian factor is always a factor, and it seems like the Sharks were like, you know what, we got a great value there. Like, let's go, you know. So I like that pick for them a lot. I like the Dickinson pick a lot. I thought the Tija Ginla pick was great too, for all the reasons you said, and I think that's an awesome story for the NHL because you got a guy who comes from his dad's one of the greatest hockey players ever. Had a long career, and now his son gets to be the first ever draft pick for this Utah franchise. I think that's really, really cool. Not something we obviously get to see too often. So seeing that happen in real time was fun to watch as well. So going off of that, I know we also just talked about them for liking their Demidov pick, but I'm rolling with the Canadians again for taking Michael Hage at 21. Another good value pick there, in my opinion. There were a handful of forwards that started falling around that area, and they just took advantage of the way the board fell, and I like that value pick as well. And kind of going back up towards more of the top of the draft here, I really liked the Wild taking Zeev Buium, a defenseman from University of Denver, at 12. Buium is another high value pick. If you're not seeing a trend here and reasons why I like what I like, Zeev Buium was ranked as the 7th overall prospect from Elite Prospects draft rankings. There's no surprise that Brock Faber, a defenseman, is going to be playing for the Wild for a very long time. He just finished second in the Calder Trophy votes, which shout out to Connor Bedard. He ended up winning that award as well. That happened before the draft for Rookie of the Year of the NHL. And so the Wild taking advantage of the way the board fell and landing Zeev Buium to pair with Brock Faber for many, many years. That's a rock-solid defensive duo they got there. So I really like that one. Did you have any of these picks you liked or anything you want to add to these guys?
Yeah, one guy I forgot to mention actually, and I thought the Blackhawks were going to go this route at 18. Cole Iserman falling to the Islanders at 20. When the Blackhawks were going to pick at 18, I'm like, well, this is a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you take him? And of course, they went a different route. They went with Sasha. Is it pronounced Boivert?
I'm gonna let you figure that out.
We're gonna go with Boivert. I think the S is silent, and if it's not, it is for me. But I think they got a tremendous value at number 20 overall with grabbing Cole Iserman there. So that was for me. Obviously, all these are first round guys, but I think that there was a lot of teams that were able to grab high value players later on in the draft.
Yeah, I had that as a pick I liked as well. It seemed like teams were a little nervous about his one-dimensional play, Iserman that is, and that kind of just gave him a big reason to fall. But I, just like you, was sitting there like, hey, he's on the board for the Blackhawks at this rate. Like, why not take him? This was a guy that was once viewed as a possible 1-1 option in this draft when people first started putting mocks together, and his value has kind of fallen off since the winter, but for a while it still looked like he was going to be a top 5, top 10 pick. So people obviously were thinking highly of him at one point, and I think it would have been a good risk for the Blackhawks to take, because at that point, why not? And it's a guy that you didn't think would be there, so why not just take advantage of the moment? But they obviously did not, and the Islanders did. So yeah, I had that down for another pick that I like as well. And I just had one more pick here that I really liked, and that was Liam Greentree, and he went to the Kings at 26, another guy that I thought was a high value pick. He is ranked as the 15th overall prospect according to Elite Prospects, so Kings got themselves nice value there as well, and I like that pick for them too.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with that, to get a prospect 12 or 11 spots after they were projected to be drafted. That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And you know what? As far as the Blackhawks go, I love that they were aggressive. They had 2 first-round picks going into round 1, traded up, grabbed Vanacker at the end of the first round. It seems like they have identified a body type that they like. They want big guys, and they definitely want speed. And I like that they have identified the player types that they want and that they're consistent with it. A lot of these guys do have pretty high upside from what I was able to gather, but one thing I've noticed is it's going to be some time before we start to see some of these guys on the Blackhawks, and I'm okay with that, because if you approach hockey the same way that you approach like minors in baseball, right? Like, you're going to have double A or single A, double A, triple A. You're going to have guys who are entering the league and entering the team at different points of time. I think that that's okay to have that same mentality across hockey too. You've got some younger guys, you've got some guys that need more time to develop. That's totally fine by me. There's going to be, I'm sure Lev Shinnoff, depending on his Michigan State situation, might be in the Blackhawks with he might be with us next year, but who knows with him even. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything on what you thought of the Blackhawks draft overall, but I just liked that they were able to identify player types and stick to it.
Yeah, that's kind of been their MO for a little bit here. They have certain traits they like. Skating's one of them. And it seems like this year they focused a little bit more on adding size into that mix too, which I think is good, because the Blackhawks have a lot of skill players and skilled prospects that are a little bit, it's becoming more the norm in the NHL, but in general are a little bit more undersized, but we're starting to see more and more of those guys, those skill guys, be a little bit smaller, but now they're kind of combating that and adding some size to their prospect pool, and I think that's always a good thing, because even though the league's trending one way, you don't want to just completely, abandon any sort of other type of player or prospect just because the league's gravitating towards, one thing. It's still a physical game. You got to be able to hit people. You got to be able to, send a message. You got to get physical. You got to get dirty, and it's good that they can get some guys that can handle those things. and also guys that can deliver those kinds of hits and things like that too. So in terms of the whole class, it seems like a lot of people were pretty big fans of what they did from a national writer's perspective. Seeming like some of the guys they got in those middle to later rounds were pretty good value picks for them. I personally haven't had a ton of time to dive into exactly what every player is, but we'll go through here in a little bit and we'll kind of do some snippets of what we're looking at with some of those guys. I've been referring to Elite Prospects draft rankings, and we'll kind of go through and see what they have to say about these guys. So shout out to everyone at Elite Draft Prospects for putting together this wonderful guide and giving us some material to be able to read and to go through with our listeners and things like that. But I think now that we're diving into the Blackhawks a little bit, Kev, I think just to go down one by one and kind of talk about our first rounders here. Obviously, the big surprise here was we went into the night having 2 first-round draft picks and ended up having 3. So Kyle Davidson has never been afraid to show that he's aggressive and he wants to get who he wants, and he did that again by getting into the first round for a third time on Friday night. So obviously we'll talk about the big fish that they reeled in at number 2. They ended up going with Artem Levshunov, defenseman from Michigan State. What are your thoughts on him, Kev?
A lot of people will say this is the safe pick, and it probably is, right? But I think that they shored up their defensive side by taking him. If you look at, not historically, like along the lines of the Blackhawks history, but like in the time that we've been watching the Blackhawks, you look at all the defensemen that they built this team around, and sure, they had Patrick Kane, sure, they had Jonathan Toews, but you've got a guy like Duncan Keith who's holding it down on his side of the ice. So I personally
Michigan State Spartan.
Oh, I didn't know that, actually. I like the pick. Yes, it's the safe pick, but in reality, it was kind of a win-win with either guy, whoever you ended up with, whether it was Levshunov or Demidov. I was happy with it. I think the issue a lot of people have with it is there's just no fireworks around that pick, and Demidov was the pick where there was fireworks, around his name. So I'm okay with it. I think the Blackhawks addressed a position of need, and I think that they grabbed one of their defensemen of the future here.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it there, because that was one thing I was going to bring up too is obviously it's a good pick. A lot of people applauded the Blackhawks for taking this pick, and there are a lot of people that really like Artem Levshunov as well, but it just isn't as sexy as perhaps Ivan Demidov would have been, because he's the super skilled offensive guy that would have, you would have been drooling of watching him and Bedard on the ice together. But I think one important thing to remember here for us Blackhawks fans is, we're just looking at who won the Stanley Cup in the Florida Panthers, and we can't forget how important defense is, and just showing how far being able to shut opposing teams down and limit what their stars can do, how far that can get you. And obviously it got the Florida Panthers this year to the Stanley Cup, and sure, they have a lot of other, reasons for winning, but they're a gritty, physical, nasty bunch, and that was their identity, and that's what really helped them get over the hump and get to the point where they were hosting the Stanley Cup this year. So I think that's obviously an important pick for the Blackhawks too. And obviously, Artem Levshunov, I call him not a sexy pick in comparison to Demidov, but he has a lot of skills that are really interesting too. Obviously, the right shot factor is huge. He's a big physical guy. He's someone who can play in all situations, whether that's full man on the penalty kill, on the power play. He can stay on the ice in any situation and find success there, which I think is really important. And he fits the mold where the Blackhawks like people who can skate. Well, he's big and he's physical and he's 6'2", I believe, and he can skate and move around really well for that size, and that's obviously important for a defenseman. So obviously a lot of things that are exciting about his game, even though some people are a little sour on the pick. I think in the end, either way, the Blackhawks could have got a good player. Yeah. And I think no matter what they did here with Levshunov. Now, I personally think he's probably heading back to Michigan State for a year, which is fine in my opinion. Like you were saying, it's okay to have patience, and I think the Blackhawks are a team specifically that can have some patience here. I know Kyle Davidson at the end of the year preached about how winning's a priority now, but still, this isn't going to be overnight success. This team has a lot of holes. It's going to take quite a bit for them to improve, and we'll start to see them get better. I think they'll be a little bit better this year, and it'll just be a gradual increase. So it's not like they're going to be all hands on deck trying to make the Stanley Cup playoffs this upcoming year so they can afford to have Levshunov go back to Michigan State, or if he joins the organization, have him go to Rockford and play with them for however long he needs, and then kind of go from there. But overall, I think it was an important pick. Having a good defensive core is never a bad thing, and the Hawks have really put a focus on that in the draft over the years. They got Sam Renzel as well from the draft a few years ago. Kevin Korchinski, we're seeing him get some NHL time now. Alex Vlasic, another guy they drafted recently, he's locked up and he's here for the long haul. And we're starting to see another guy by the name of Ethan Del Mastro get a little bit of time in the NHL, but he seems like he's another guy that they think can be a part of this team in the future. So it'll be exciting, and we should start seeing these guys start to trickle in, over the next few years, and it'll be fun seeing finally getting a chance to see these guys at the NHL level, and see if we're really going to be able to have that strong defensive core that they have their sights set on. So all in all, I think I'm pretty happy with Levshunov.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of key pieces there, and it addresses a position of need, right? Because not all these prospects are going to hit, right? So you have to keep drafting guys at certain positions where you need the prospects or the pool of prospects. Sean, I think what we could do, honestly, since the NHL is about to hit more of like a dead period other than, like off-season moves, maybe every podcast episode we come out with, so each week we dive into a different player that they drafted from this year's draft, and just some analysis behind that player, if you're cool with that.
Yeah.
And just pick a new player each week, and then we can dive into what we noticed from either watching film or just reading more about that player. So more to come there. And we've got quite a bit to dive into with NBA too. I mean, I've been watching the Shams Twitter account right now. There's been some stuff happening. We'll dive into some signings after we talk about the NBA draft, so that way it'll buy more time for some more moves to happen. But I do see stuff happening right now. So as far as NBA draft goes, this year's draft was far from exciting when you look at the prospects that were that were in this year's draft. But maybe we start with a couple picks that we really liked. There's obviously the storyline of Bronny James, so we can definitely dive into that. But do you want to start with a couple players that you liked, either their value or where they landed and the team that they're going to play for?
Yeah, so my first pick that I liked a lot was Reed Sheppard to the Rockets at number 3, and my reason for that is I think if I had the first pick in this draft, I probably would have taken Reed Sheppard number 1. And a big reason for that in an uncertain draft is I just take a look at the long list of guards that Kentucky has put in the NBA lately, and they're all turning into studs. So it's like, why would you not want to take the opportunity to get that next guy? So Reed Sheppard going to Houston was one that I liked a lot. Next up, I had Nikola Topic to the Thunder at 12.
Interesting.
He was a guy that was projected to maybe be a top 8 pick. Has a partially torn ACL, so he dropped. And the Thunder have been crushing the draft lately. And I like their judgment on this pick here, so I'm going with that as another one that I liked. Kind of trickling into some of the later stuff here. Terrence Shannon Jr. to the Minnesota Timberwolves at 27. He's going to fit in with what they want to do really, really well. He flies in transition, and him and Anthony Edwards and another guy who I'm sure you're going to talk about at some point are going to be fun to watch in the open court. Got a few more here. Late value picks that I liked. Isaiah Collier to the Jazz at 29. Collier was a guy, now granted, before the season started, us Bulls fans didn't know how Kobe White was going to develop this year. Collier was a common mock to the Bulls at 11 or 10 or around there before the draft order was established. So for the Jazz to get him at 29, I think that's pretty dang good. I also got another Jazz pick not long after. I like Kyle Filipowski to the Jazz at 32. Are we looking at a Walker Kessler replacement there?
I think so. Or I think it leaves it open for a Walker Kessler replacement in case, they've got a trade this offseason that they like and can throw him in it.
Yeah, I thought that was a good value pick for them, and obviously with Kessler's name being dangled out in trade rumors, well, you got a guy who could probably step in and take those minutes right away, so I thought that was a good pick. And then the last one I got, a little bit more of a personal choice here, but Enrique Freeman from the University of Akron got drafted 50th overall to the Indiana Pacers. He's the first Akron Zip player to get drafted in the 2-round format ever, and he's the second highest pick from the University of Akron ever. He's got a great story. Former walk-on, all the way up to NBA draft picks. So for those who don't know, I went to the University of Akron. So just exciting for him to get drafted and to see that whole career lead up to this point. So definitely thought that was one of my favorite picks, but for selfish reasons. And I'll probably be tuning into a little bit more Pacers games here. But yeah, I had to give Enrique Freeman a little shout out there. So those were the picks that I had in mind. How about you?
Dude, that's a good team for him for development purposes. I mean, look at all the guys that they've developed in the NBA. I think he ended up with a nice spot. Yeah, and you know what? I will talk about the other guard from Kentucky that you didn't mention, Rob Dillingham, to the Timberwolves. I like the situation. I like the pick. I like the value. Obviously, Mike Williams is getting older, so I think that this is a great pick for them. It's one of those like electric picks that nobody really saw, the Minnesota Timberwolves going up and getting Rob Dillingham. So definitely a great pick there. I will talk about the Bulls pick with Matis Buzelis. When they first made the pick, I'll be honest, I was a little ignorant with the pick because I didn't really know too much about the kid. But the more I read, the more film I watched on him, I really, really like this pick a lot. He was a kid that was projected by a lot of experts to go 5th or 6th overall, and he dropped to us at 11th.
Going you off look of that at too. Sorry, not to interrupt real quick, but there was a point in time where he was actually projected to be the number 1 overall pick too.
100%, and he said that himself in an interview. You look at his emotion with how happy he was to be a Chicago Bull, and that's another reason why I really love this pick, is because we need players who want to be a Bull, who are excited to be a Bull. Whether you know you're going to be working under Jerry Reinsdorf or not, you know what? I'll take it. If you're excited to be a Bull, great. So I really like that pick for them. I thought that was great value at that point in time. Couple other I'll just glaze over. Devin Carter to the Kings. I really like that pick. I think he brings a lot of physicality. Obviously, he's a defensive-minded player. He's improved his shooting. I think that's a good pick by them. Dalton Knecht, unfortunately, dropped to the Lakers. They got great value somewhere in the middle of the draft there. And then I'll actually dive into a player selfishly that I was excited about myself, and this is why I'm wearing the Illinois State hat. Antonio Reeves. So for those of you who don't know, Antonio Reeves, also a guard from Kentucky. So if you want to talk about guards from Kentucky doing well in the NBA, you can bring his name into it too. Antonio Reeves started his basketball career at Illinois State. Had a couple of years there. Obviously played pretty well to be recruited by Kentucky. Had a nice career at Kentucky. Purely just a shooter, right? I think his role in the NBA is going to be very similar to like a Ben Gordon type, where he just goes, he comes onto the court, maybe like a 6-man type of situation, puts up some points. You could say like Lou Williams even, I think, is another comparison. Just shooting a bunch of threes, just high volume shooter. So I like where he went to New Orleans, and who knows what that team's going to look like, because it seems like there's still some shuffling going on their end, but really liked that pick by them. And, I mean, I guess now we can get into the pick of Bronny James to the Lakers. I definitely have my opinion on this, but I'll let you dive in first.
Yeah, I think it's bullshit. I think...
Same.
the fact that his agent, which I believe is Rich Paul, threatened teams before the Lakers that if they took Bronny James, he was going to go to Australia. Now, what I will say is it's really impressive the fact that LeBron James is even physically at the point where he can play with his kid. That's incredible. We may never see something like this again. But the fact that they completely staged it to where the Lakers got him ruins that entire moment for me, and it always will. I don't care how fun it'll be seeing those two suit up together for the first time in a Lakers uniform. The fact that they forced that to happen it makes it annoying and stupid, in my opinion. And there was always this talk too where like, oh, LeBron will go follow wherever Bronny goes and he'll go sign with them so he can play with his kid. I wish we would have got to see LeBron have to stick to his word there, because here's the thing, like if I was the Atlanta Hawks or if I was, I don't know, anybody, I would have just taken Bronny in the first round and been like, this is going to come with a LeBron signing, and would have really put his word to the test and seen if he was actually going to do what he said he was going to do. So obviously that's not the case. And Clutch, I've never obviously dealt with them, but seems like they can be a little bit of shady agency in terms of the way they go about their business and the way they handle clients and things like that. So I think just them forcing their way to make Bronny and LeBron be on the Lakers together, I think is just, it's stupid, and it ruins the whole moment for me.
Here's my thing is like, what's interesting when you say it ruins the moment for you, it ruins the moment for Bronny. Like, the draft is no longer exciting. You know what's going to happen. You know you're going to get picked. You know who you're going to get picked by. You know what pick number you're going to get picked by what team. Like, that ruins the moment for him entirely. And that's really the excitement behind the draft, is not knowing. I honestly was hoping that the Boston Celtics were going to take him at 54 and just like basically forfeit a pick and let him go play in Australia, because for them, they could have just been like, fuck it, we don't need the pick. We just won a championship. We're already good enough. We don't need to get this dude in the second round. He can go to Australia. We don't care. I was hoping they were going to pull a move like that just to shake things up, but yeah, I mean, with his agent calling the different teams, threatening that he's going to go play in Australia, it's just a shady move. It's a stupid move. It ruins the integrity of the sport. And I don't like it. It makes me not want to cheer for Bronny. I'm already not huge on LeBron myself. And I'll clarify here. LeBron as a human, A+. LeBron does more for the community than any player in NBA history. Nobody will ever do as much for the community as LeBron does. But on the court and after shit that's pulled like this, I can't stand it, man. Like, on the court, all he does is bitch for every single call. And then you see something like this where he basically just rigs the draft so his son's going to get taken to his team at 55. It's just kind of bullshit. So that's my thoughts on the Bronny James situation. As far as NBA draft goes, I mean, it's only 2 rounds, so I think we covered quite a few picks ourselves. Hey, I'll call the elephant out in the room here. Kyle Filipowski, there's some news that dropped this week. We want to wait until we have some more information on that before we talk and dive into it. I would like to hear his side of the story, if anything is released. And if not, then we'll talk about it, and we'll give our input on it. But I think it's important to wait and see, because, these are somewhat serious allegations that are going on. So, especially with his family involved. So we'll wait it out and see if there's comments made by him. Have you been keeping an eye on any of these signings that are going on right now? Do you want me to dive into some of this, or do you have some news?
You probably got a little bit more access to it. I just been periodically checking my phone to see if anything has come in.
Okay.
So
yeah, not a whole lot of action.
I was gonna say we can talk about the Bulls move first, and because we already know what that is.
Good point.
Yeah, so the Chicago Bulls, this is Sunday when we're recording. Late Saturday night, they signed Patrick Williams to a 5-year, $90 million deal. And I will talk about this first because I'm not the biggest fan of Patrick Williams, but I thought he was going to get a lot more money than this. I actually think this is a pretty fair contract. Given what the Bulls have done so far, including drafting Matis Buzelis, this signifies they are committed to a youth movement, and it opens the door for Patrick Williams to get a lot more meaningful minutes on this team and to be an important piece to this youth movement that it seems like they're shifting towards. So I like that they locked him up for 5 years, and for him, if he takes that next step, which we're still kind of waiting for him to do, he'll be a free agent again at 27. So he can get paid a lot by another team, or he can get extended by the Bulls at that point and earn his bigger contract. So 18 mil per year for Patrick Williams, I think that's a very, very fair price for the Bulls to pay, and I'm kind of hoping that he takes the unexpected leap like we kind of saw to Kobe White this past year. And when you look at Kobe White, it took him a little bit of time to develop too. So for Patrick Williams, just hoping that's the case. And even if it's not, with the way today the NBA is, with contracts being given out, like $18 million a year for a guy he'll at the very least give you defense, like that's fine with me.
Yeah, I think when you talk about him getting more minutes with this youth movement, right? I think that could be good or bad. I would hope that it's good. I would hope that we're spending our money wisely here. I would hope that he has a resurgence similar to what Kobe White had. But my concern is this. The Bulls have had a really hard time developing him. If we're going to give him a 5-year deal, who's to say that that's going to change? And it's not even just him. The Bulls have had a hard time developing players in general. So that's what concerns me about this deal. It's not 100% on Patrick Williams, and he definitely has to play his part. He has to pick up the pace. He was drafted because he was supposed to be aggressive. He was obviously young. He was known for his defense. Well, we don't see any aggression from him when he's out there. He kind of just looks like a lost puppy. He just, a lot of times, just sits along the three-point line. I would love to see more aggression from him, even if that means slashing and getting to the lane, earning points the hard way. Would love to see that out of Patrick Williams. But there's a lot of unknowns, and I think that this season will open a lot of eyes. As long as he stays healthy, it'll open our eyes to the Patrick Williams that we're going to get in the future. He is still pretty young, so he's got time to develop. I just think that Bulls fans right now are impatient, myself included, and we want to see players be successful right away because we've been shit for so long. So who knows? I mean, I am open to, I think, waiting out this season and seeing how he plays this year and kind of just reevaluating from there. But when you look at $90 million across 5 years and the type of money that's being thrown around right now, that's really not a whole lot of money. So value-wise, I think that was good value.
Yeah, and Kobe White had his first big year coming off the first year of his contract. So hey, maybe we get lucky and we get another guy that takes that leap. But I guess the only downside with Patrick Williams too, his health's also been a concern for him. He just had a pretty serious foot injury this past season, but I'm guessing if the Bulls were willing to commit that money to him, that means they probably feel pretty good about where that's at. But we'll see once the season rolls around. It's just, I'm just hoping that this is really what they're going to do. They're going to roll with these young guys and try to figure all the rest of this out in a couple years. And if that's the case, I think we would probably expect Patrick Williams to start being more of a better player and taking that kind of role as a guy who can lead those young players and stuff. But, it's the Bulls, so we could be sitting here recording and they could sign Paul George, and I'd be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like they definitely are. I mean, we know they're trying to get rid of Levine. There was a report this week that they're going to have to attach a first-round pick to it. If that's what it takes, don't do that. We can't afford to give up draft capital. That would just be dumb. Just let Levine play, or let Levine request a trade, or I don't know, release him. Do whatever you have to do, but don't give up a first-round pick. That's stupid. Some moves that are happening. So since we started recording, NBA free agency just started 45 minutes ago. Golden State is waiving Chris Paul. There is $30 million on the line if they did decide to sign him again for this year. So he's going to be a free agent. James Harden is signing a 2-year, $70 million contract to return to the Clippers. Honestly, again, contract value, that number is pretty reasonable with the money that's being thrown around in the NBA right now. You could say James Harden starting to slow down a little bit, but still, with the money that's being thrown around, 2 years, $70 million is pretty reasonable. Kevin Love is finalizing a 2-year, $8 million deal to return to the Miami Heat. And I actually just got a push notification. This is from Bleacher Report of Chris Haynes reports that the Warriors declined a Zach LaVine trade. And apparently
it was Andrew Wiggins and Chris Paul for Zach LaVine.
I don't know why they'd ever turn that down.
They waived Chris Paul.
Well, yeah, but like they didn't have to waive.
They said, no, thank you. We would just much rather waive Chris Paul. That tells you what they feel about LaVine.
But like, that's my point. You didn't even have to waive Chris Paul. Bulls would have taken him and paid him his $30 million, and they're already trying to get rid of Andrew Wiggins. So I don't know. That's a little confusing to me, but maybe they feel they can get better value from Andrew Wiggins alone elsewhere. And then Klay Thompson, obviously, he's going to be moving on. He's no longer going to be a Warrior.
Speaking of, Woj reported he plans to have discussions. When I say he, that's Klay Thompson. Plans to have discussions with the Mavericks, Lakers, Clippers, and 76ers in the opening hours of free agency.
Interesting.
Yes.
I know those are some teams that DeRozan is linked to more specifically.
I've seen
Clippers.
some information come out today that seems like the Mavericks are maybe pursuing him the hardest right now, but whether they end up getting him or not is one thing. It also sounds like he's kind of interested in going to the Lakers too. It sounds like he would even take like a minimum or I don't know how they would have to structure that, whether it be like mid-level or minimum or something. He would be open to doing something like that to play for the Lakers.
Just a higher signing bonus. Shams just reported seconds ago Clippers are actively working on trades to move Russell Westbrook.
That's a bull. He's a bull.
Well, I look at like 3-team trades, right? Like, okay, maybe this can open up talks. You know, you have the Clippers in on a trade. It's a 3-team trade, and this is how we're able to move LaVine. But there's going to be a lot of movement happening here, guys. And honestly, by the time this is released and you're listening to it, there's a lot more moves that have already happened at this point. So
there was, I think Shams maybe. Let me see here. There was information about Paul George too. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through his timeline right here, too. Paul George plans to speak with the Clippers,
Yep.
Philadelphia 76ers, and Orlando Magic starting late Sunday night Pacific time. So it seems like a lot of players are looking at a lot of different destinations right now, and free agency is always crazy once it opens. So I think things are going to happen really quickly for the first batch of free agents, and then it's going to slow down, and then you'll have a lot of moves right before the season starts. This is typically how it works.
Yeah, I'm going to guess we get Paul George news like early tomorrow morning. That's not going to take long. It seems like 76ers are the team to watch there.
Dude, it's interesting the Magic are even in on Paul George. Like that. I mean, I'm sure they're probably just throwing dollar signs at him to get him to have a conversation, but like that would just feels like such a weird fit to me. And yeah, he's a vet. They need a vet. So like for the Magic it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For the Magic it makes a lot of sense. For him it really doesn't. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff happening. So unless you have anything else to dive into, we can kind of wrap it up. And then as far as 4th of July week goes, so our plan for an episode this week is we will be planning to take the week off of the 4th of July unless there are some big stories to talk about, then we're happy to sit down and record. But unless there's a lot of big movement happening, we will take off the 4th of July week just to take some time off, be with family, hang out. So the episode this week will be pending. But until then, you guys have a wonderful 4th of July. Enjoy your time. Be safe. Definitely take some time to recharge. I know everyone could use it. So stay tuned on an episode. We will post on our story on Instagram if we are going to release an episode this week, just so that way you know whether or not to tune in. Other than that, that is it. Thank you guys for tuning in another week, and we will talk to you soon.